Okay, students, so today we're going to be looking at sentence completion and dual short reading for the SAT preparation. These are two various types of questions that could be on the test. So the first question we're going to look at is question number 1. If you look at your handouts, the question reads, "The blank of Maria Irene Fornes Play Mud, realistic room perched on a dirt pile, challenges conventional interpretations of stage scenery." So what we have to do here is look at the multiple choice questions. A is appeal, B is plot, C is mood, D is setting, and E is rehearsal, and we have to choose the best answer to fill in the blank for this type of question. So the way that we're going to go about this is to define each answer to make sure that we understand what each answer actually means. So first, appeal means to be especially attractive, pleasing, interesting, or enjoyable. Plot is the plan, scheme, or main story of a literary or dramatic work as a play, novel, or short story. Mood is a distinctive emotional quality or character. Setting is the surroundings or environment of anything. And rehearsal is a session of exercise, drill, or practice in preparation for a public performance, ceremony, etc. So what I want you to do now is look at your sheets and put a little X beside the answers that you know are definitely wrong, and put a little check mark beside the ones that could be possibly right. So what we're going to do now is look back at the question, and we understand that the blank is what we need to fill in. So the blank is referring to the realistic room, which is perched on a dirt pile. So when we look back at the answers, does appeal really make sense? That means to be especially attractive, pleasing, interesting, or enjoyable? I would definitely say no. The plot has to do with the plan, scheme, or main story. That really doesn't have to do with a room. When we look at the mood, that has to do with a distinctive emotional quality. A room really isn't an emotional quality. The setting is the surroundings or environment. So that seems to be right because the room is definitely the setting of the play. And rehearsal means a session of exercise, drill, or practice. Does that really make sense? I don't think so either. So we're going to go with setting, because that is definitely what the room is, and that it could make sense for what the blank is describing. And the correct answer is setting. So the justification for this, if you wanted to note this down on your sheets, if you're going to look at it later, the justification is that a realistic room perched on a dirt pile is what the blank is referring to. Therefore, the answer of setting best fits because a room is part of the setting of the play, so this is the best fit answer for that question. Alright students, so now we're going to be looking at question number 2 for sentence completion. This question is a little bit different because we have 2 blanks to fill in. So each multiple choice question is going to have 2 words, and the first word corresponds to the first blank and the second word corresponds to the second blank. So the question reads, "Ironically, an affluent society that purchases much more food than it actually needs suffers because of that blank, since in conditions of affluence, diseases related to overeating and poor nutrition seem to blank." So A reads lavishness and adapt, B reads overabundance and thrive, C reads corpulence and vex, D reads practicality and awaken, and the last one, E, reads commonness and abound. So first, let's break down the beginning of the statement to fill in blank number 1. So the beginning of the statement reads, "Ironically, an affluent society that purchases much more food than it actually needs suffers because of that blank." So the definition here has to do with more food than it actually needs. So when we look at the possible answers, lavishness, does that really describe more than we actually need? Not really. Overabundance, that definitely describes more than is actually needed. Corpulence doesn't really make sense. Practicality, that doesn't really apply to this type of question. And commonness, there is a commonness of food, but that wouldn't really be the word to describe that blank. So the word that best describes the bolded statement here is abundance. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, let's move on. The second half of the question reads, "Since in conditions of affluence, diseases related to overeating and poor nutrition seem to blank." So I think that the clue in this statement is that it starts with the word ironically. So what that has to do with is, if a statement is ironic, then in this case, when there is an excess of food, the society is going to suffer because it's ironic that they have a lot of food, but then they're suffering because of it. So therefore, poor nutrition in these conditions of abundance would grow. And therefore, if we look back at our questions, our answers, and we said that overabundance makes sense, does the second half of thrive make sense? It does, because when there's an overabundance, these conditions, these conditions of poor nutrition do seem to thrive. So that does make sense. Does everyone understand that? Okay. Okay, students, so we're continuing with sentence completion, and we're going on to question number 3 on your handouts. And this question reads, because of the blank effects of the hot springs, tourists suffering from various ailments flock to the village's thermal pools. So a word in this question that we might not understand is ailments. And what does that mean? That basically just means minor illnesses. So let's say a cold or some cuts or some body illnesses that we have. And the answers read, A is succulent, B is redolent, C is cerebral, D is mandatory, and E is therapeutic. So once again, go to those questions. If you understand what those words mean, put a little check mark beside the ones that you think could be right, and an X beside the ones that you know are definitely wrong. So to help us out a little, we're going to define each answer. So succulent means rich in desirable qualities. Could that make sense for the hot springs? It definitely could, so we're not going to eliminate that one, yes. Redolent means having a pleasant odor. Does that really make sense that why people would go there? Definitely not. Cerebral means betraying or characterizing by the use of the intellect rather than intuition or instinct. That doesn't make sense for this question. Mandatory means authoritatively ordered. Definitely doesn't make sense that tourists would go to the hot spring for this because they were told to go. Therapeutic means relating to the treating or curing of disease. I think that definitely makes sense for this question. So let's look at the question again. And the blank is saying that because of these certain effects of the hot springs, tourists are coming there to get treated for their ailments. So the ones that we said could be true were succulent, which means rich in desirable qualities, and therapeutic, which means relating to the treating or curing of disease. So, since we know that ailments means diseases, therapeutic effects would make sense that tourists would come to these hot springs to get cured. So what is the correct answer? The correct answer is E, therapeutic. And our justification for this, if you wanted to write this down, is that it makes sense that the therapeutic effects of the hot springs would attract tourists suffering from various ailments because in that sense they would be cured once they came to the hot springs. Okay, students, so now we're going to be looking at dual short reading, and this is going to be question 9 on your handout. And we are first going to look at passage 1, and what this type of question is we're going to be reading a passage about a certain topic, and then we're going to be answering a question in multiple choice form based on this. So we're not going to be filling in any blanks, we're just going to be answering a question based on a part of the passage. So let's read this together. Question number 9. The intelligence of dolphins is well documented by science. Studies show that dolphins are able to understand sign language, solve puzzles, and use objects in their environment as tools. Scientists also believe that dolphins possess a sophisticated language. Numerous instances have been recorded in which dolphins transmitted information from one individual to another. A recent experiment proved that dolphins can even recognize themselves in a mirror, something achieved by very few animals. This behavior demonstrates that dolphins are aware of their own individuality, indicating a level of intelligence that may be very near our own. Okay, very interesting. So, we're going to be looking at the answers now, or the questions, that they're asking us. And it says in lines 2 to 8, which are indicated on the passage, the author of passage 1 mentions activities that suggest dolphins, A, are usually sensitive to their environment, B, do not generally thrive in captivity, C, have a unique type of intelligence, D, are uncommonly playful animals, and E, have skills usually associated with humans. So once again, you can go back and you can put a little X beside the ones that you think are not true, and a little check mark beside the answers that could possibly be true for this question. So I've taken out now lines 2 to 8, so we're going to look at just these sentences and then go back to the question. So let's reread this. Studies show that dolphins are able to understand sign language, solve puzzles, and use objects in their environment as tools. Scientists also believe that dolphins possess a sophisticated language. Numerous instances have been recorded in which dolphins transmitted information from one individual to another. A recent experiment proved that dolphins can even recognize themselves in a mirror. So what we're going to do now beside the question is we're going to make some jot notes on what we understand from this passage. So I've gone ahead and done that. What do we know? We know that dolphins can understand sign language. Put a circle around understand. They can solve puzzles. We're going to circle the word solve. Then they can use objects as tools. Please circle use. They can possess a sophisticated language. Let's circle language. They can transmit information from one dolphin to another. Let's circle transmit information. And they can recognize themselves in a mirror. So let's circle recognize. And what do these all sound like? These words: understand, solve, use, language, transmit information, and recognize. These are all human qualities. We can do these, dolphins can do these. So let's go and look back at the answers. And the answer E is they have skills usually associated with humans. Does that make sense after looking at the question again? It definitely does. So our justification is that they can understand, solve, use objects, communicate, and recognize themselves. Therefore, these are all human traits, and the answer of E does make sense for this question.